right, thanks so much, Drew. Are you all seeing my slides? Perfect. So like Drew said, my name is Christopher Cunha, and I am with the Great Plains Institute, where I work on our communities program, which is also the home of the Metro Clean Energy Resource Teams. So that's Metro CERT, the logo up in the top left next to the GPI logo there. So I'll be talking to you today about some electric vehicle one-on-one, little crash course on everything I think you might need to know as you start your personal electric vehicle journeys. So just a quick overview of kind of the agenda for tonight. First, I'll cover kind of why and what are EVs, the different types of EVs, the difference between conventional vehicles and EVs, some things to consider, myths and facts, charging, we'll touch on charging a little bit, the state of the EV market, and some tools and resources to help you along on your own EV journey. And speaking of EV journeys, pictured here is my colleague Diana McEwen with her Nissan Leaf. I think this was right after she bought it. I drive a Prius, so I don't have a fancy picture with a new EV to show you. So this is my colleague Diana. She also loves taking selfies, so that's why she's in here. So first up, why and what are electric vehicles? So there are three types of EVs. Starting over on the left in all green is the battery electric vehicle, or just the EV or BEV. So battery electric vehicle doesn't have a gas tank. It runs only on its battery that plugs in, and it's 100% powered by electricity, and you refuel them by plugging it into a charging station or to an outlet. And they have zero tailpipe emissions. And then next you have plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, which have both a gas tank and an engine, but then also a battery that plugs into something. So that you can refuel the gas tank at gas stations and then the battery at a charging station. And they have a moderate range, under 50 miles, that would handle most of your maybe daily commute before it'll switch over to the combustion engine. And then lastly, you have a hybrid electric vehicle, which like my Prius, for example, primarily uses a combustion engine and then has a battery, but the battery doesn't plug into anything. It just recharges via kind of the engine or the braking. And it uses its electricity to really help out with the mile per gallon, and some have EV modes at very low speeds. So here's an example. Like I said, the Toyota Prius is kind of one of the most known hybrid electric vehicles, and they don't qualify for the EV tax credits, and they don't have the full electric miles, but they do have pretty nice miles per gallons. So that's their kind of top selling point. Next up, you have plug-in hybrid electric vehicles like the Mitsubishi Outlander. So it has a 22-mile all-electric range before the gas engine will kick in. They do qualify for some tax credits, and so they have a pretty high miles per gallon because they've got that battery helping out. And then when it's just using the engine, 25, a little bit lower, and plenty of towing capacity for anything you might need on a daily basis. And then lastly, you have the fully battery electric vehicle, like the Chevy Bolt. And so the Chevy Bolt has a range of almost 260 miles. It's all electric, no gas tank, and there are zero emissions from driving. And so the EPA has calculated that it's about the equivalent of 118 miles per gallon. They call them like e-gallons, and some other info here, but we won't get too in the weeds on specific models. So what are the benefits of owning an EV? There are lots. So there's no engine in the fully battery electric ones. So there's way fewer moving parts. So there's a lot less things that could go wrong and a lot less things that need maintenance. And then you have the fuel savings. So you're saving on maintenance, time, and fuel. There's zero tailpipe emissions from battery electric vehicles, and result in large greenhouse gas reductions. Same thing goes for the hybrids, the plug-in hybrids, and just the hybrids that you're just using less fuel. There's pollutant reduction. We have cleaner air in our communities. I think the past couple of weeks we've seen how much an impact dirty air can have on just your ability to be outside. So having that clean air is super important. And electric vehicles can perform almost all the functions of traditional vehicles, and in my opinion, some of them better. There's less noise pollution. I think most noise pollution in cities comes from cars and highways and things associated with cars. So EVs are really quiet. They don't have those engines that are, and all the other parts that are super noisy, and they're super fun to drive. I always tell people the first time you drive an EV, it's like driving a spaceship, because the second you touch that gas, it's all electric. There's no lag while the pistons are moving and stuff. It's all instant. So they are really fun. And then there's an environmental motivation. So according to the EPA, 61% of transportation emissions come from small engine vehicles. In Minnesota, transportation makes up an even bigger section of that pie. So as electricity becomes more renewables, EVs help reduce greenhouse gas emissions even more by being fueled by cleaner energy and reducing an even more significant section of emissions. So what are the costs associated with operating an EV? So like I said, they're cheaper to own and operate overall because you're both saving on gas and saving on maintenance. So here is a screen grab from a DOE website that I can maybe drop in the chat or send out later after this, where I pulled this up today. In Minnesota, average gas is $2.75, and the electric e-gallon equivalent, which is defined there, is $1.17, so less than half of what it costs to fuel a regular vehicle. And like I said, they require way less maintenance. So an example of that is here we have the 2016 Chevy Cruze and the 2017 Chevy Bolt with their intended maintenance schedule. So on the left, you see you have a bunch of rows of your maintenance that need to happen at all sorts of mileage markers. And then with the plug-in or the all EV Chevy Bolt, you have rotating the tires, rotating out your air filter in the passenger cabin, and coolant at 150,000 miles. And I think windshield wipers are the one other thing that you might be, and headlights. So compare that to all the other things that happen with a traditional ICE vehicle, and you're just saving a ton of time and money on that. And yeah, there's just fewer points of failure, and so there's fewer things that could go wrong as well. So this is a screen cap from a website called carboncounter.com, and it compares the lifetime costs and the carbon intensities of over 100 vehicles. So you can type in, I don't know, like I typed in earlier today, my Prius versus some other EVs and traditional ICE vehicles, and it'll plot it all on this graph where it's got greenhouse gas emissions and costs of over the lifetime of the vehicle. And it's really neat tool, carboncounter.com, and I can again send all of this out. So there in the black, you'll see it's higher costs of those traditional ICE vehicles, and then higher greenhouse gas emissions. And then in the middle, in the pinkish red, is the plug-in hybrids, and then the bottom you have the EVs in that yellow. So what does the EV market look like today? So there's been a lot of talk of EVs in the last few months. A lot of people call it the decade of the EV. So General Motors has their big announcement that they're going to go mostly electric by 2035, and their company is going to be carbon neutral by 2040. There are 30 EVs from 21 brands available for sale this year, and comparing that to 17 vehicles from 12 brands in 2020. If I was giving this presentation in 2 years ago, I would be saying, oh yeah, there's more options coming. Like, there isn't an EV for everyone yet, but we know they will be there. And now there's every kind of EV you can imagine. So with even more, you've still got the people who be like, but I need a big truck, and those are releasing this year and next year as well. And then President Biden also announced a transition that for all federal vehicles to be going all electric. And they just had a summit about 40% of vehicles by 2030 being union made and electric. So here's some headlines of the last few months. Again, just talking about how quickly things are going to be changing in the market, that really this is the way that it just makes more sense. And it's just eventually going to be what's happening. There are new SUVs. SUVs are the highest selling models of cars, so there are tons of SUV options that are coming out as well. And it's coming to Minnesota too. This is a startup in White Bear Lake that are focusing on medium duty trucks, all electric for commercial uses in government fleets. And then Bloomberg predicts that 57% of all passenger vehicle sales will be electric by 2040. And I've already described some of the benefits associated with electrifying transportation. And in order to even get a greater market share, we're going to need to overcome some barriers that I'll talk about in a second. And I see the questions coming in, so I'll try to address them. Yep, I see them. So here's just some trends for Minnesota's EV market. So we have sales for plug-in hybrids and battery electric vehicles in 2018 and 2019. And so battery electric vehicles nearly doubled their sales numbers between 2018 and 2019, which is a great thing to see, that more and more people are driving them here in Minnesota. And there was also the increase in PHEVs from 2018 to 2019. And so the battery costs as well. So as production increases and kind of the science behind different battery technologies advance, the cost of batteries are continuing to fall, with many expecting EVs to achieve cost parity between last year and this year. With the pandemic and all of the production line shortages, I think that might be a little bit in flux. I'm not sure that data has settled quite yet, as we're still kind of experiencing those all the problems with production across the board. So that's a little bit on EVs, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about EV charging and considerations. So this is just the basics of charging and electric vehicle supply equipment, EVSE. So over on the far right, we're going to start with, you can plug in an EV, you get home, and you can just plug it into your outlet. We call that a level 1 charger. It's just a regular 120 volt outlet, and that will add 3 to 5 miles to your battery for every hour that it's plugged in. And so then if you need a little bit more charger, you would then install a level 2 charger, and that's a 240 volt line, like the kind you would use for your dryer or a larger home appliance. And most vehicles can use that. There are lots of different adapters and stuff. So Teslas can use a level 2, and they have 10 to 20 miles of charge per hour. And then the last 3 on the left are what are called DC fast chargers. Excuse me. And they charge up your car basically in an hour anywhere. It depends on how much electricity is being put into the charger, but you can reach near full charge in an hour or less. And so those would be stationed along kind of major highways or at a lot of common public rest stops along major highways. And same with level 2. You'll have level 2 at grocery stores or outlet malls or pretty much anywhere there's conduit that can be installed. So with all of those chargers, most charging, over 80% actually just happens at home and overnight. So we actually recommend that people start with a level 1 charger station, which is just plugging it into the wall in your garage or wherever you park, before you invest in a level 2 station, just because a level 1 will probably cover your daily commute. Unless you're driving a little bit longer each day, then maybe installing a level 2 in your garage might be more helpful, and they run anywhere from a couple hundred to several $100s to kind of install. And most so someone once told me if somebody doesn't know how to plug in, or an electrician doesn't know how to plug in a level 2 charger in your garage, they shouldn't be an electrician. It's pretty basic work, and there are several lists of kind of certified EV electricians that do that online. So charging in Minnesota. So this is a screen cap from PlugShare, and the network of Minnesota chargers is growing each day. So this is what the chargers looked like a while back, and this is what it looks like now. They are everywhere. So a lot of people will say like, oh, I never see chargers, or my car's going to break down somewhere on the highway. And it really won't happen unless you're one of those people that doesn't fill up their gas tank unless after the dial is at the bottom. There's so many places to plug in around the state, and a lot of the VW settlement money that Minnesota is getting is going out to build DC fast chargers and level 2 chargers along our major corridors. So like I said, this is a map from the MPCA, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, where there are existing corridors and where they're planning to put corridors. And more information about this particular plan is on the MPCA website, and I'll send that out as well. So we're currently in phase 2 of 3 right now. And yeah, I'll send out the MPCA website after that. Sorry if you can hear a dog barking in the background. I tried to pick the room farthest away. So now some kind of myths and perceived barriers around EVs, because a lot of people have a lot of hesitations around electric vehicles. So one of them is that EVs don't pay their fair share of taxes, but gas is taxed a little under 30 cents, which pays for roads, but that's only 45% of the road funding. So plug-in hybrids that have both the battery and the battery that plugs in and the gas tanks still fill up with gas, and they still pay that tax. And then battery electric vehicles in Minnesota are required to pay an additional $75 fee every year. And so over 10 years, EVs actually pay more in total taxes than a traditional ICE vehicle because of registration and those other fees. And we have a cost breakdown blog about this that I'll also include in the follow-up. Another common one, it is cold 9 months and snows 9 to 10 months out of the year here in Minnesota. So EVs don't work in the winter. And winter does slightly reduce the range of EV batteries around 30%. Those are on those extremely cold 3 to 4 days a year where most people aren't driving around anyways. And a lot of that loss, or some of that loss, can be mitigated by using the climate control. So what happens is people get in their car when it's really cold and they crank the heat, and that heat is coming from the battery. So a lot of EVs, or all EVs, come with heated seats and heated steering wheels, which are what people like. You touch your cold steering wheel, but turning those on significantly decreases the amount of energy you're using. So you can be warm and the car can still use its energy for traveling and less for kind of climate control. And then EVs always start in the winter. They're not gonna, as long as there's a charge, they're not gonna not start like some traditional ICE vehicles. And Scandinavia is the most proliferated EV market, and it's also cold there. So if they've been doing it for years and it's most of their cars, then it should be no problem here. Well, another thing is EVs don't have enough traction for the winter. And first, there's plenty of all-wheel drive EVs coming to market this year, next year, and already on the market. And the most important thing in winter driving is actually the kind of tires that are on your vehicle. So an EV with winter tires versus an ICE vehicle that just has your regular summer tires. Those winter tires are the most important thing. EVs are only commuter cars. They don't go far enough for me to make sense. And here you have some range in miles of some PHEVs and all electric EVs. And unless you're driving 300 miles a day, you're pretty good to go electric. The Nissan Leaf there at the bottom now has models that are up to 226 miles. So, and this doesn't even account for if you stop somewhere and plug and charge for a few minutes, you can increase your range very easily. So unless you're doing several cross-country trips a day, you're going to be pretty A-okay. Next is that EV are coal cars that you're powering your electricity that's being, or the electricity that you're using to power your car is just coal that's being burned or other types of non-renewable resources. And GPI did an analysis that found that electric vehicles give a greenhouse gas reduction, a total lifetime greenhouse gas reduction of at least 61% in most cases, and up to 95% in many cases. So that up to 95 is an EV running on 100% renewable energy, like Xcel's wind source, so that the small greenhouse gas emissions comes from the vehicle and battery manufacturing processes. And but I mean, if you look on the left and you look on the right, the options on the right are still far greater than just your traditional gasoline vehicle. Batteries create an environmental hazard. So battery recycling continues to improve. And so when a battery is done in its EV, however many years after somebody decides to retire it, those batteries still have 20% of their total capacity left. By the time people are done driving them, they have some like 80% of their total charge capacity left. So it's important to recycle those batteries and use them in a lot of storage for different things as we clean up our grid and we rely more on local storage for electricity. That's going to become a huge option for that. And electricity for charging is still the greatest contributor to vehicle life cycle emissions. And actually back on the last slide, I can send out the analysis piece done by GPI on the total greenhouse gas emissions over the lifetime of vehicles. And then, yeah, here, so in 2019, the DOE launched its first EV recycling plant. So the long-term plan for these is that they'll be used for storage after they're done in the vehicles. And anecdotally, a lot of people who are driving vehicles find that they're getting many more years out of their EV batteries than they were first. Then the manufacturers said, you'll have to replace it in X years. A lot of people are finding that it still has plenty of life past those year dates. There's not enough charging infrastructure. Here's again that charge share map. There's over 1,000 level 2 and DC fast chargers in Minnesota. All major highways have DC fast chargers. Level 2 and DC fast chargers. And since most charging happens at home, you're actually not charging on the road all that often. The grid can't handle EVs. A lot of people worry that putting if everyone just goes home and plugs in their EVs, the grid will go haywire and there'll be mania. But 80% of charging happens at home and at night. So that's when people are asleep. So there's actually fewer uses for electricity across the board. So it's a lower impact on the grid. And renewables pair very well with EVs. And you can distribute peak loads in a variety of ways, either through kind of managed charging with solar, if you have a solar panel hooked up to a charger, or the wind blows a lot at night and that's when EVs are plugged in. So they pair really well together. And then all public utilities are required to have an EV plan in place. So they're planning, utilities are planning for the shift to electric vehicles. It's not something that's gonna hit them by surprise. And next up, I wanted to touch on some tools and resources that might help you along the way. And I know there's a lot of information coming in really fast, so I'll try to address everyone's questions here at the end. So the first off is Shift to Electric, which is an EV market and business solutions developer from Minnesota. They have a bunch of super useful stuff on their website. They have an EVs owners group with a Facebook group. They all get together and they go out to car shows with their EVs, and they let people, they're just like, they love EVs and they want everyone to drive one. And they've got their buttons and their t-shirts and all their stuff. They're very excited about EVs. They have sales guides, things about workplace charging, home charging, all the things you would need. They were founded by Jukka Kukkonen, who is my go-to EV expert when I have a question about EVs. Pictured there in his EV, and their website is shifttoelectric.com. One of the things that they have on their site is this models available EV info list. And I think they have one for nationally and then one for the Midwest. And it was last updated in June. And so they just list out all of the different EVs that you can purchase in the Midwest with all of the different information, including what if they still qualify for tax incentives, their price before and after that, what their range is, all-wheel drive, how much charge they get per hour from various chargers, their top speed, their towing capacity, their safety ratings. I'll send out the link to this in the chat. I know I have a lot of links, and I didn't want to be pausing every 2 seconds to send you into the chat, but this is a really cool thing that every time it's updated, I print it out and I'll just look over it as I plan for the future EV that I plan to own. Oh, and then another thing that Shift to Electric had that I also want to mention is they have a list, I believe, like a list of reviews for various dealerships that people have bought EVs from. So EV owners can go on that website and say, hey, I talked to this person at this dealership and they helped me buy this EV. So there's, if you don't know which dealership is dealing with EVs, they have kind of an anecdotal, it's not a forum, but an anecdotal place where people talk about the positive experiences they've had with various people who are knowledgeable that are selling electric vehicles. And then next up, XL Energy has tons of super helpful EV stuff as well. So here is a snippet from their EV vision saying that they want to increase EVs to 30 times the number there are today, saving a lot of money and a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. So XL has several different resources on their site. They've got a great electric vehicle comparison tool, a page for different incentives and rebates that people qualify for, and then information about their EV charging programs, which it sounds like they'll tell you all about next time. And just touching a little bit on their different stuff. This is one of the coolest things I've seen is they just have this really nice interactive EV comparison where you can put in how much you're going to be commuting, your budget, incentives that you might qualify for, how many seats you want in your car, the kind of charging you're going to have available to you. And you can filter out electric vehicles, plug-in hybrids, all different kinds of stuff. Check that out for sure. It's really cool and can help you kind of narrow in on what you're thinking if you're thinking about purchasing an EV. Then they have an incentives and rebates page where they list all the different savings options that you might qualify for or the vehicle might qualify for, which is also very helpful. Then they have several different EV charging programs that allow you to really kind of customize how you want to charge your EV. They have some options, the EV Accelerator at Home, where you pick one of two chargers and they'll just install it, take care of it. They'll do all the maintenance and you just pay for plugging in your car at night. And they have, you can set up a separate meter for your EV charger where you're charging at night. You have regular residential. You can choose to charge with different renewable mixes. With an eye on the clock here. I won't go too into this because you're going to hear lots more about this. Oops. Like I said before, PlugShare is a crowdsourced map of charging stations. People can actually review the charging station, and it provides an in-depth look at the charger and its location. And you can actually plan a trip. Say, I'm going from, I don't know, Cedar Rapids to Duluth on a road trip, and I want to plan my trip. It'll map it out and tell you where the chargers are along the way, and you can print out that map and bring it with you. There's also an app. It's really, really useful. This is the Minnesota Department of Transportation EV dashboard, and it just has kind of an interactive map telling you where charging breaks down, but kind of by counties, and that's not counties, that might be counties, but giving you more information on where the electric vehicles are being driven, the kinds there. So it's an interesting map if you're like looking at maps with lots of different data from around the state. There's the EV emission tool, which lets you estimate the emissions from an EV based on gas prices and other factors in your zip code or whatever zip code. If you are trying to, if you're trying to say, is an EV right for me? How much am I saving? You can use Carbon Counter, like I mentioned earlier, for that kind of lifetime stuff. And then we have Drive Electric Minnesota, which is a partnership of EV champions from around Minnesota. It's facilitated by Great Plains Institute. There's various different organizations involved and that really want to see EVs succeed. And so Communities Charging Ahead is a page on the website where there's lots of different tools and resources. We have fast facts, we have top 10 charging station considerations for more of kind of public charging, all different kinds of stuff on that website. And I see the questions rolling in. I see that counter going up. And actually that's all I have. So I think we'll open it up to Q&A. Drew, I don't know how you want to do this. Should I just go down the list?
Yeah, well, thanks so much.
Right.
Yeah, Christopher, for that presentation. Yeah, we had some questions rolling in that I think some have been addressed just by your presentation, but I want to make sure that they do. So we'll get to those. Let's see, there's some about batteries, and I know that you talked about it a bit. I'm wondering if the person with the questions around batteries wants to follow up with any questions that you still have. If you want to unmute, go ahead.
I did have a question about the battery, the cost for the battery replacement, and how long are they usually good for?
Yeah, so that depends a bit on the model, kind of when, is it an earlier EV kind of from the mid 2010s, or is it a newer model? And I can follow up with kind of a more precise answer, but generally people are finding that the batteries, I think they say they or the manufacturers will often say they last like 4 to 5 years kind of at peak performance, and then you'll see a slow degradation. But people in practice have been driving them now for 8 years and have had no problem that they need, or they haven't seen a significant decrease in performance where they feel that they need to replace their battery. And when they do replace the battery, costs can range quite significantly. I think it just depends on the model and the manufacturer, but I've seen, I want to say it's can be between 3,000 and 5,000, but that is a number that I will follow up with on a more exact number. Just write that down.
Thanks. You also, I think, addressed most of the questions here that Clement Hagen had about batteries, but I know you talked about, the recycling it and putting it into storage. And then I think the follow-up question with that is, what happens to these batteries after storage use? Do you know?
Yeah. So we are not there yet, and that's kind of a question that the industry is trying to figure out. The ideal and what they're trying to get at is, how do we recycle these batteries sustainably in a way that we can recycle the heavy metals that are used in their production and use them again later on. And I will have to follow up with you on that. I'm not up to date on what the plan, just because it is something that is talked about and being actively, I think that's one of the leading kind of topics of battery research is, how do we make batteries at the get-go that we can, at the end of their life, recycle and get a ton of return on the different parts that were used to build it. Because it's also quite, it's not easy getting heavy metals, and we want to, so they want to design them in such a way that they last a long time, and that when their life has expired, we can get them back in a sustainable way. So I will also get back to you on that. And I see 3 more coming in too.
Fair enough to say that we don't know yet because it hasn't happened. Let's see. So there was another question just about kind of the costs. So I think that was the graph that you're showing. We're using and emitting greenhouse gas emissions with the production. So I think the question is about mining of the chemicals for the batteries, and then fuel for generating the electricity. So what is included in the cost of an electric vehicle, not including the electricity?
Okay, so like the sticker price on those, kind of crunching the numbers.
Yeah.
So that would be your let me go back to that graph. Oops, of the total lifetime cost. Sorry. But to answer your question, where'd it go? Sorry, I had a lot of slides. Well, this one will work. So I can send out the on the GPI graph that had the kind of greenhouse gas emissions data. I can send out that article, and that goes in depth on the analysis on where the greenhouse gas cost comes from those vehicles. But Carbon Counter uses fuel and basically just the cost of the vehicle and the cost of maintenance. So replacing, and I don't know exactly what they call the lifetime of the vehicle, if it's 8 years or 10 years, but for an EV, that would be how much was the sticker price on the vehicle, how much is the basic maintenance that you're doing. If you get in an accident or something happens to the vehicle, that will be another incurred cost, just like a traditional ICE vehicle. But it will mostly be the sticker price and kind of routine maintenance, which was on the 27 Chevy Bolt, the routine maintenance was rotating the tires, air filter, and then after 150,000 miles, draining and refilling the coolant for the circuits.
And then with tax incentives for these cars, is it different depending on what car you get, or does that help kind of lower the costs too?
Yep. So the federal tax incentives, let me go back to that slide, that are often associated with EVs. A lot of them were kind of, the government said, they went to the car manufacturers and said, you can offer a tax break of X amount for X number of vehicles. After you sell X number of vehicles, 200,000, off the top of my head might have been the number. After you sell 200,000 vehicles, people can no longer get a tax incentive for your vehicles. And now there are kind of different ways that companies and governments are allowing people to kind of juggle those incentives around, so that Tesla, for example, sold through their incentives, but through some agreements with other companies and stuff, there were some incentives left over. So yeah, there's a federal tax credit, which depends on the car's battery capacity. Yeah, I mean, so there's several different rebates and tax incentives, and it just kind of depends on the type of vehicle, where you're buying it, a couple different things. And I might have forgotten the second part of that question.
Oh, no, that was good. Yeah, just like more info about the tax credit. So definitely just varies, I think, but I think that answered it. Let's see, there was another question about winter in Minnesota. Obviously, it's a concern. So if you are going to store an electric vehicle over the winter, so not use it, do you need to hook them up to a special kind of charger? You know, something that would be used for a ICE vehicle?
No, you shouldn't need to. You could leave it. If it was me, I'd probably go out and just turn it on every once in a while. But there's no special kind of thing you need to do to store it. I wouldn't put it on the street for the snow. You're going to be shoveling a lot of snow at the end of the winter, but no, you could just park it and it'll be fine.
Nice. And then a question about charging stations. Do EV charging stations cost money for the use of the electricity? And how much? Or...
That is a great question, and a question that the people who own those chargers ask themselves all the time. Are we going to charge people for using our electricity? And the short answer is sometimes. It really just depends on if the person who owns the charger decides to charge people for the electricity that they're using. A lot of times the people who own them will find it's more expensive for them to charge people than the money that they're taking in, just because the associated mechanics of credit cards and hooking it up to a smart way to charge. So it really just depends on who owns the charger. There are some that are free because the people who own them want people either driving to their location to spend time at maybe a mall, or some employers offer it as a perk for working. You can charge your car at work for free, and others you'll pay a couple bucks. Others do pricing and like you can plug in for 2 hours at this price. Any additional hour will be more money because they want people kind of rotating through. They don't want somebody sitting there all day and leaving the charger busy for other people who might want to charge. So sometimes there's a time incentive it'll be pretty cheap for a little bit, and then they want you moving out. But it kind of just depends on who owns the charger.
Nice. I don't know if this was fully addressed, but do you know if there's like a expected lifespan of an average electric vehicle?
Yeah, I think manufacturers will say it's about the same as a regular traditional ICE vehicle, in the same range. And just with traditional ICE vehicles, often people drive much longer than the 4 to 6 to 8 years that a manufacturer might say. is the lifetime. I mean, my Prius, and which is not a plug-in hybrid, but has over 160,000 miles, and it looks and drives. The battery on that is much smaller, but drives like it did day one. And then I saw a question about powering from, about going back to the cost, about mining the chemicals. So fuel for generating electricity. So in the cost, in your sticker cost, manufacturers are going to be including the cost to kind of produce the vehicle and their entire processes. And they might actually, depending on their strategy, price them lower just to get more out the door and more people excited about EVs as part of their own EV plans. And then the cost of generating electricity and the fuel for generating electricity. So in Minnesota, or XL's has, that just depends on kind of what your utility rate is, whatever plan you sign up for. So you can sign up for a more renewable mix. XL has a pretty great renewable mix from the get-go. There's a lot of renewable just mixed in there already, and then you can opt into higher renewable mixes or different pricing structures, which again, you'll hear about, I'm sure, more in depth next time. How much are tax incentives reducing cost? So there are tax incentives that are, up to $7,500, and they can take the price of a vehicle down, similar to, I think I'm not going to say what the prices are because it's been a while since I've looked at prices and they've kind of changed rapidly. But that EV info list that I referred to, that I can send out, has a lot of the prices that can be after you take the tax incentive.
Nice. Another one that came in is, do EVs stop charging when they're fully charged, or do they continue to trickle charge if they're still plugged in?
Yep. No, they'll kind of turn or kind of shut themselves off. They all have computers on board. And yeah, I don't know of a model that wouldn't, a model that's being sold today that wouldn't, after it's fully charged, turn off. I think most most electronics across the board, after they've completed charging, will turn off any charger. But yeah, they will stop using electricity.
Nice. Well, did anybody have any further questions that we did not address that was in the chat they would like to ask? Oh, we got another one. Well, we'll do this one more, and then folks, let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to unmute. But another one is, are there any risks of battery fires?
With vehicles from manufacturers that kind of are tried and true, that shouldn't be an issue. I have never heard of a fire in a Chevy Bolt, the Ford Mach-E, the big auto companies aren't going to put out cars. They're investing in their future, so they're not going to put out cars that pose any kind of risks to their brand or to their the image that they're going to cultivate over the next 5 to 10 years as they shift to EVs. Chevy Bolts are buying back their vehicles because of battery fires. There are cases of things happening, but I haven't heard or seen any large, any higher risk than any recalls with traditional ICE vehicles. Like when you compare the two, there's certainly going to be things that go wrong, and okay, so yeah, it probably depends on the make and model, but I have largely not heard of huge problems, but there are, like any large produced thing, Yeah, so newer models. Yeah, anyways.
Good to
So
know.
acting
Yeah, I
the
mean,
here.
yeah. Yep, conversation happening in the chat. I think there's also some events and dates noted here from Minnetonka residents. So if folks want to check those out, and like you said, the Shift to Electric folks and Yuka Kokunen is they're a really awesome group. If you're really interested in talking more about EVs and getting to know more people who are interested in them too, I think sharing that. Let's see, we're getting about to the top of the hour here. Any further questions or thoughts from Christopher?
I just want to put a plug in for that Minnesota EV owners group, because I have two plug-in hybrids now, and I got all my questions answered. If you go to one of those meetings, everybody's happy to help, and you can get very, very specific questions answered then. So just putting a plug in.
Awesome, thanks.
I've volunteered with the EV owners. They are super knowledgeable. They're super excited. They're super great. I totally recommend going to any and all of those info sessions. And I did want to put up my information. If anyone wants to contact me, you can reach me at kakuna@gpisd.net with any follow-up or anything. And I'll work with Megan to kind of get all the follow-up things that I mentioned today.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining tonight, and hope you learned a lot about electric vehicles and consider buying one. We'll see.